Hey guys, welcome to the most important and interesting tutorial of this series. That is, we are going to see about the object-oriented programming in Python. So before going to the coding part, let me explain what is an object-oriented programming. So let us consider some simple operations that are such as addition, subtraction, division, and multiplications. So here we are going to see about addition, division of two variables. So you can either do them by simply adding them in a code path, or you can also define them as function. So what this function do is it just gets two variables from you, x and y, and it do the summing part and gives you the output. So here you can see I have a summation, and I have difference, I have division, and I also have multiplication. So you can see all of these are operations. So what I can do is I can group all of the similar functions into an object, say class. So in this class operations, you can see here I have created a class called operations, which has some summation, difference, division, and multiplication. So the basic concept of object oriented programming is converting complex things into simple objects and simple and accessible blocks of code. So let's jump into our coding part. So let me define some functions. So let's start with some, which is going to take two variables, x and y. There are two things that a function can do. A function can do a performance of its own. A function can also return a value. So let me do it in both way. First, let's put print x plus y. So this returns nothing. It just performs some operations. So next is difference. So let same, it takes two variables, and I'm going to print x minus y. So next is our division. So you can see here the keyword for defining a function is def, define function. So what you can see, I'm using a colon here to end the function statement, and anything behind this with four indent comes as a part of the function. So let me put division, and it takes two variable x comma y. So here I'm not going to print, I'm going to return. So what I'm going to return, I'm going to return some value. So what is that value? Is x divided by y. So let me differentiate you about this while we go down. Next is multiplication. It is going to take value. So return x star y. So if I now call some if I now calls these two, what will happen is, let me show you. I'm going to just call these functions, and I'm going to give some value like 10 comma 5. So if I now run this program, what happens is whenever this function is called, the program searches for, the computer searches for this function, and these 10 and 5 are assigned to this x and y, and this x and y, and then in the next line we are printing x plus y, so the output is getting printed. So in the similar way I do it for, yeah. So if you see here, it is as usual doing the difference part and printing x minus y. So now if I put division here, so if I now call the division function, see what's happening. So you can see here nothing is getting printed because the value, this function is returning some value, but we are not storing it, or we are not using it. So let me assign. So now what happens, this function is called, and the output, the after processing after processing the values, or after going through the code, it is returning some value, and that is x divided by y. Now what I'm doing is I'm storing it in z, and now I am printing it. Now you can see the output. So you can see here 10 divided by 2 is 10 divided by 5 is 2. In the similar way you can also try for multiplication. So I think you guys would have understand what are functions and this return, what is the importance of this return value. So now let's jump into classes, object oriented programming. So let me put all of these into a single class. So let me call it class operations. Before going into object-oriented programming language, let me walk you through an important concept, which are the concepts of local and global variable. So let's come to this one after that. So that let's okay. So what are this local and global variable? Let me define a variable called x is equal to 10. So this x is equal to 10, which is it is common for all of these functions. So now if I print x, so let's remove all these for time being. So if I now print x and call this some object, sorry, some method, so you can see this x is printing because this x is an local variable. If I do that in the same way, so I can print x in all the functions. But in case if I define a variable inside this block, it becomes a global, sorry, local variable. So I'm declaring a variable called z is equal to 50, and I'm printing this 50 inside this sum itself. So now if I run sum, you can see this 10 is getting printed, this 50 is getting printed. So in case if I now uh, use that or print this z inside a difference and call the difference, sorry, I think before I failed to call this difference. So now if I call this difference, you can see it is showing that a name error, z is not defined because this z is an block variable, or it is an local variable, and it is applicable only to this sum function. So I think now we can go back to our wait a minute, I think my system got hanged. So now we can go back to object and classes. So let's remove this and remove all this. So let me declare a class operations. And generally, whenever a class is called or whenever a class is running, what happens is a function called init usually runs on its own. So we can define it if we are using a variable. So now we are going to pass variables between a program, actual program, and a class. So we need this init function. So let me, and we have to define what and all are the variables that we are going to use in this class. Here we are going to use x comma y. So what is this self? This self means that this class, so a class will have this self inside this class belongs to, or says that I belong to this operations class. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign some variable. So for this class specially, so a self is equal to self dot x is equal to x. So you have to understand that this x is this one, and this x is a new variable I'm creating. You can also put xx here. So now let's create for y. So self dot y is equal to y. So what does this mean? This means I'm assigning this y variable that I'm getting from the program to this class. I'm assigning it to a class variable called yy. Now let's do the same function. So now let's move all this. So now I can put just self here, which means the variables I this sum belongs to this operation. And now what I can do is I can print, I can use these variables here. So self dot xx plus self dot yy. So I was talking about we can't use a variable defined in an function in another function, right? But now what is happening is we are assigning this variable here what it happens, it makes this variable available for this whole class. So now we can use those variables in everywhere in this class. So let me just copy paste this, control X, control V, and just change the operation. This is a difference, and this is division, and this is multiplication. You should also note we are not passing the variables here, we are passing self. So if I just put self here, it is enough. So if I now run this sum, operations dot sum, let's see what is happening. Operations dot sum, no, sorry, I have to pass the variables, right? So let me I'm just creating a variable for this class. So what I'm going to do is operations, 10 comma 5. Now I have assigned this 5 and 2 to this x and y. So now this 5 and 10 can be used anywhere, everywhere inside this program. Now I'm calling the object like z is equal to sum, is it dot uh, division, is it dot division, and now difference is it dot multiplication. So let's run this program and you can see the output. So every time this runs, the 5, 10 and 5 values are passed to this operations class, and this 5 and values are assigned, and these operations are getting printed. So these are some basic things that these are basic things. Once we go, or once we start some projects or some new works, we can understand better the use of the class. So we should also talk about inheritance here. So we'll talk that in a while.